The idea that we, the people, democratically elect the president is a false notion. 5 times in American history, the president has won the popular vote, but still lost the presidency. That's because we use the Electoral College as a means to elect the president. It is important that we understand the problems we currently face under the Electoral College system, so that we can argue for a system that more fully represents our diverse nation. In my undergraduate degree, I chose to minor in political science because I have a passion for justice and democracy. I have worked for several political campaigns and have seen our democracy in action, for better or for worse. In order to understand the current political situation, we must first cover what the Electoral College is, then briefly explain some of the concerns with our current Electoral College system, and finally, let me tell you one possible solution to the current crisis. First, what exactly is the Electoral College? The Electoral College was an 18th century solution to 18th century problems. The founders, they didn't trust the populace to elect the president. They also didn't want one region to have more power than others. The Electoral College was created through the 12th Amendment to the Constitution, ratified in 1804, as a compromise between election of the president by a vote in Congress and election of the president by popular vote of citizens. Essentially, rather than voting for the president, the people are voting for special electors who will then vote for the president. The Electoral College gives each state 1 vote for each senator or representative. Those votes go towards the candidate the state has elected through the general election. Each state is guaranteed at least 3 electors, as each state has 2 senators and at least 1 representative. This means that the least populous states, Wyoming, South Dakota, Montana, etc., have 3, while the most populous state, California, has 55. Thus, total, there are 538 electors representing 100 senators, 435 representatives, and then there's 3 electors from the District of Columbia. Since 1880, almost all of the states have used a winner-take-all system, wherein the candidate that gets the most popular votes within the entire state gets all the electoral votes for that state. Now that we know what the Electoral College is, we need to understand why the compromise made over 200 years ago does not really work for today's electorate. According to a 2016 article by Justin Curtis in the Harvard Political Review, in the 4 elections since 2000, 40 out of the 50 states have voted for the same party every presidential cycle. With 200 electoral seats out of the 270 needed to win, nearly already guaranteed for both the Republican and the Democratic candidate, the parties spend a disproportionate amount of their time and money in Florida, as well as Colorado, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Ohio. Essentially, candidates don't go to states they see as either safely in their column or so far for the other party that it's not worth it to campaign. Key battle states then get too much attention during the election and even after the votes are cast. Swing states are more likely to get federal grants, more federal disaster relief, and more waivers from federal regulation. This system also means that some don't believe that their vote counts, so they don't even show up at the polls. In the 2012 race between President Obama and Governor Romney, in swing states, 63% of the voting age population cast ballots, whereas in non-swing states, voter turnout was only at 55%. An additional problem is that some states have too much power. States should have 1 electoral vote for approximately every 600,000 people. But because the lesser populous states are still guaranteed at least 3 votes, it is significantly lower. In 2012, Wyoming's votes only represented 188,000 people, which is less than 1/3 of the people represented by California's electoral votes. Senator Richard Durbin, a Democrat from Illinois, argued that 3 million voters in the least populous states of Alaska, Delaware, the District of Columbia, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, and Wyoming have as much voting power in the Electoral College as 9 million Floridians. Interestingly, the conflict favors Republicans. Each time there has been a problem with the popular versus the Electoral College vote, the Democrat has lost. A final problem with the Electoral College is that it doesn't really represent the true elections. According to the Pew Research Center, in the 2016 election, the large mismatch between the electoral and popular votes came about because Donald Trump won several large states by very narrow margins, gaining all of the electoral votes in the process, even as Hillary Clinton claimed other large states by much wider margins. It also does not realistically reflect the impact of third parties. Although Ross Perot won a stunning 19% of the popular vote nationwide in 1992, he did not win any electoral votes, since he was not particularly strong in any one state. Pew Research has also noted that in all presidential elections since 1828, when presidential campaigns began to resemble those of today, the winner's electoral vote share has, on average, been 1.36 times his popular vote share. There are obviously several problems with the Electoral College, and Gallup Research reports in 2016 that only about a third of Americans even support keeping the institution. However, getting rid of the Electoral College is not really possible. Getting rid of the Electoral College would require 2/3 of both chambers of the legislature to pass it, or a constitutional Congress of 2/3 of the states, and then it must be approved by an astounding 3/4 of the states. According to the National Archives, there have been more proposed constitutional amendments to change the Electoral College than in any other topic. There's been 700 proposals in Congress in the last 200 years. Plus, as Julia Zari, an associate professor of political science at Marquette University, mentioned in 2016, if the candidate and party in question had had enough energy and organization behind them to change the Constitution, they probably would have won the election in the first place. Although the Electoral College cannot easily be changed, I suggest, instead, a proportional system, like the one used by Maine and Nebraska, rather than the current winner-take-all system. In the proportional system, each congressional district within a state gets one vote, and then the 2 Senate votes go to the candidate with the most total votes in the state, meaning California's 55 votes would be split up into 53 separate congressional districts. This change would not take a constitutional amendment. The Founding Fathers left the choice of how to determine electoral votes exclusively to the states in Article 2, Section 1, which states, "Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors." While this proportional system wouldn't solve all the problems caused by the Electoral College, it would mean that lock states by either party would still be given attention by the opposing side, even if they just stuck to districts they thought were more apt to vote for their party. It would also mean that the results of the Electoral College would more closely resemble that of the popular vote. Finally, it would encourage voter turnout, as while it may not seem like your vote counts on a statewide basis, it certainly counts within a small congressional district. The Electoral College has served us well in the 200 years since it was introduced as a compromise on the way the U.S. elects their president and the vice president. However, in the 2 centuries since, the problems resulting from the passage of the 12th Amendment continue to become even more clear, and the dusty reach of the 1800s really needs to end. While there is not a solution that will fix all the problems with the Electoral College, we should consider simply changing the way our individual states divvy up their votes. A proportional system would allow for a fair distribution of electoral votes and encourage all to have their voice heard. Above all, however, we must remember that even with the problems, we live in a pretty great country. As Winston Churchill once said, democracy is the worst form of government, except all those other forms that have been tried.